Bank of Canada has graced everyone in Canada with a little bit of a gift right before the holidays. In their recent rate announcement, they announced a 0.5, that's right, 0.5% rate drop. This is the second rate drop in a row where they did a larger rate drop at 0.5, and this is their fifth consecutive rate drop in a row, bringing their policy rate down to 3.25%. This is all in advance of the holidays. So we're going to talk about this and more. So let's dive into it. Welcome back to another episode of the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast. This is Manning Up After Dark, a raw conversation between you and I on what's happening in real estate in Greater Vancouver and in Canada. And again, the Bank of Canada did a massive rate announcement, giving us another 0.5% rate drop. This is largely due to the fact that the economy in Canada has not been doing so well. They had significant rate increases over 2022 and 2023 that really slowed things down. Their goal was to bring down the inflation rate, and they did just that. In fact, the Canadian economy going into quarter four only grew by about 1%. Now, that is not healthy growth that the Bank of Canada would like to see. So the only tool that they really have to help impact that is to lower the interest rates. They're trying to spur on more people to start buying and spending in the economy. Of course, this is always a balancing act whenever they're trying to lower rates to encourage spending while not increasing inflation past their target of 2%. A couple other reasons why they decided to do a more aggressive drop this time is, of course, our unemployment rate, which is another economic indicator, has rose to 6.8%. This is a significant jump, meaning more Canadians, especially young Canadians and newcomers into the country, are struggling to find work. And I can tell you, as somebody who's looking to hire, it is incredible the number of resumes we are getting on a job post. We recently made a job posting looking for an administrative assistant position, and we had nearly 300 resumes come in. And we're talking from people from all walks of life. Tons of people who are coming into the country, obviously, but other people as well who are coming from different industries who might have got laid off on their jobs or for whatever reason left their jobs and are looking to make a career switch, which means it is a highly competitive market right now for people looking to get in for jobs. Of course, the Bank of Canada looks at that and they say, if we're seeing an increase in the unemployment, we need to do something to spur on the economy, make borrowing more affordable for businesses to be able to hire more people. They also cited that the Trump tariff threats is another reason with Canadian uncertainty in the economy. If that does happen, they need to be prepared for it. So with Trump threatening a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods, they're trying to make sure they get ahead of that by making sure the economy starts seeing some growth. Again, another reason why we've seen a larger drop in the interest rate. However, they also announced, Tiff Macklin mentioned that this will likely be the last of large ones for a while at least. They're going to do a more gradual approach going forward with these price adjustments. With all that being said, what does it actually mean to you as a Canadian? How does this policy rate change affect you going forward? Well, let's first talk about those who have variable rate mortgages. If you've been sitting on a variable rate mortgage, whether you just got into the market and have a new one, or you rode that wave all the way up and now you're riding it back down, the good news is you're going to have a savings of about $30 for every $100,000 in mortgage that you have. So if you're looking at an average $500,000 mortgage, you're looking at about $180 a month in savings. That's no chump change and definitely will help the pocketbook. If you're also looking to borrow on a home equity line of credit, you've got lines of credits, credit cards, this all impacts that as well. And we will see rates come down on those aspects as well, making borrowing against those factors much easier on the pocketbook when you're going to pay the interest. Now, of course, let's talk about the housing market and what impact this is going to have. The biggest mistake most buyers and sellers make is that they think this is going to be an immediate impact. There's always going to be a lag time after any announcement that the government makes when it comes to changing policies. So it's very important to understand that if you were a seller, don't expect the floodgates of buyers to completely open up and we start seeing people swarm. Now, if you're a buyer though, this will start to create more competition as more buyers do come into the market. So you don't want to wait too long. If you've been planning to buy a house, don't wait until spring when every other buyer is thinking about waiting till spring. Take advantage starting this December and start working towards getting yourself primed and ready to start purchasing. If you don't want to start purchasing in December, at least have the conversation with mortgage brokers so in January you can start your shopping. Because the biggest regret anyone's going to have is if they get into the housing market and we see more buyers enter it, and maybe, hopefully not, but maybe we start seeing more of those multiple bids. When that starts to happen, we will start to see more upward pressure on the housing market. Now, I say this because when we saw the first rate drop of the 0.5%, we saw a lot of listings hit it. I've talked about it in previous podcasts, but we also did see an increase in the number of sales. If this trend continues where we see more sales increase after rate announcements, it will eventually start to absorb some of the inventory that we've gained in the market, and we will continue to have a housing problem. Now, I've talked at length on this podcast about other housing issues we have that down the road long term will create a tighter housing market. So definitely go and check out some of the other episodes of the Manning Up After Dark series. You will learn a lot about why I think that you need to get into the market now, because 2 years from now, we're definitely going to see a vastly different market and prices are more than likely going to go up. But we're not going to focus too much on that for today. But I do want to talk a little bit about the recent announcement that the federal government made when it comes to giving a GST holiday as well as a $250 rebate to Canadians earning under $150,000. Now, while this seems like it's a nice gesture at heart, what's really going to happen is it's going to create a significant amount more of debt for the federal government. We're going to have to start printing more money. Now, if we didn't learn our lesson from the first time around during COVID, when we were printing money like crazy, inflation went through the roof. Now, in this case, what's happening is that it's not just the federal GST portion, but it's also the provincial taxes. So in British Columbia, that would be the PST. In Toronto, that's the HST. That's a significant income loss for the provinces. What the federal government is doing is they're subsidizing the loss that the provincial governments are going to experience, which means the federal debt is going to increase. Not only that, we're also going to be issuing out this $250 to about 18.7 million eligible Canadians. However, there's reports talking about, and again, I don't have the exact figures, so don't quote me on this, but you can always drop it in the comments to correct me. I believe it's about $350 or $333. I can't remember what the number is. That amount is actually what it's going to cost all the other Canadians to facilitate giving $250. So in fact, this whole program to facilitate is going to cost more than the good it's actually going to do, especially when we start thinking about the impact we had at giving away free money and other scenarios like this during the pandemic. We saw inflation skyrocket. Will these policies cause any sort of inflation? And if it does, do we go up over that 2% target? And will it impact the interest rates that we're trying to bring down? Will they have to start bringing it back up? That's where you start having conflicting policies that the government's doing, where they're trying to spur on the economy while also making federal monetary policy decisions that don't actually help the long-term goal. As we all know, in my opinion, I'm sure many other Canadians, this is just a push for more votes as we head into an election in 2025. So think about it very cautiously, because these types of impacts, while you think getting $250 in your pocket and saving a few cents here and there in GST is a great thing, it could end up costing you significantly on the back end. So before we wrap things up, I do want to show you this graph that is on CTV News's website. And this just talks about the Bank of Canada's key rate versus the inflation rate. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out with you on this is the fact that you can see here that the inflation rate typically was actually higher than the policy rate. As we went through 2008, 2009, 19, we had a little bit of changes as they were increasing. It brought down inflation. We were on a rise. And then suddenly we hit COVID. This is the COVID period where inflation fell through the roof, which meant they actually dropped that rate significantly as well. And from there, what ended up happening is we saw a policy rate that was absolutely deadlined while we saw inflation absolutely skyrocket. And of course, in 2022, we had several policy increases to the point where in 2023, we actually saw inflation go lower than the interest rates in which they were charging. So obviously from there, we held the rate for a while. We saw inflation continue to go down. Now we're actually in a position where we are chasing to bring that policy rate down. Now, if you start looking at graphs long-term like this, and you notice a trend where inflation tends to be higher than the policy rate, there is a good chance that we will see that inflation come back up and the policy rate will actually overlap and then switch. So if that's the case and you're thinking about buying, well, you don't want to wait until that policy rate is too low necessarily, because at the end of the day, you can always renegotiate a rate later on, or you can ride that variable rate down, but you can never renegotiate the price of a home. So it's very important, if you're planning on buying, start thinking about doing it early enough so you don't get caught up in the wave. That's all I have for today's episode of the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast. Thanks for tuning in. And of course, if you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button, like this video, comment on what your thoughts are. What do you feel the impact of this rate change is going to be on the Canadian economy moving forward? And of course, we will see you guys in the next one.